Germany's seemingly unstoppable rampage is a woeful distant memory. It is time to face the harsh reality now that Berlin got bombed to a ruined, smoking husk. The violent tides of World War II have somehow turned. Before the Allies get to desecrate him like Mussolini, and they will, Adolf Hitler uninstalls himself in a lonely underground bunker. However, a lot of people simply didn't believe in that version of history. Wild conspiracy theories like Hitler escaped to Antarctica and is patiently planning world domination, or the UFO sightings across the world are actually secret endgame Nazi weapons, ran rampant for decades after the war. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous now in 2023, but back then, there was just enough reason to maybe believe that Hitler too could have survived. Too many Nazis disappeared in the chaos and were living a low-key life in Germany or in nearby countries with new identities. Some even crossed an entire ocean to South America, where they would most definitely escape their past. One high-ranking Nazi in particular almost got away with this. Almost. The final solution to the Jewish question. The Nazis questioned whether Jewish people even had a right to live, and they really did do their best to find a solution. Banned from marrying Germans, banned from jobs and public service, citizenship revoked, all assets seized. The solutions included such increasingly inhumane measures, and as we all know, they only got worse. In 1939, when the Second World War erupted, the Jewish population was forcibly migrated into special housing districts called ghettos. After Germany started its brutal war against the Soviet Union in June of 1941, the Nazis doubled down with their so-called solution and committed their efforts to outright murder. There was no trial or justice. Any gypsies, communists, or, of course, Jews found in the conquered territory of the Eastern Front were massacred mercilessly. Things started going downhill for the Germans when they failed to push past Moscow and the United States joined the fight. What do you think they did in the face of looming defeat? On January 20th of 1942, high-ranking Nazi officials had a secret conference under Reinhard Heydrich. They came to their solution within a mere hour and a half. The final solution to the Jewish question was a horrifying genocide. This conference decided that the man in charge of figuring out how many people should be murdered was this video's villain, Adolf Eichmann. The Nazis herded their Jewish population from west to east like animals to their occupations like Poland, where concentration camps specifically allocated for killing people awaited. In a camp located in the small Polish city Auschwitz, some 9,000 people were slaughtered every day at its peak. The Nazis could have used all their newest technology and, admittedly, impressive administrative capabilities for doing better in the war. Instead, they were used for egregious ethnic cleansing. Camps were built at logistically efficient locations, and murder methods like poisonous gas were adapted to kill as many Jewish people as cheaply as possible, as fast as possible, like a factory line. A crucial component of maximum efficiency is the supply chain, and Adolf Eichmann was the man responsible for supply chain logistics. In 1938, when Eichmann was just a lieutenant, he displayed his competence by deporting 50,000 Jewish people in a mere 8 months. In 1941, he identified and forcibly migrated the Jewish population to the ghettos successfully with ruthless efficiency. Eichmann was promoted to lieutenant colonel because of his reputation as a supply logistics genius. When the final solution was decided, Eichmann was the one to decide how the victims were going to be transported to their final destination. Again, the German war effort was really struggling from their multi-front war in the West and the East, and there weren't enough trains to make it work. Eichmann sent 5 million Jews to the concentration camps in the span of 2 years, regardless of the dire situation. He was really good at his job. In May of 1945, Nazi Germany finally surrendered and a war crime trial was held in Nuremberg that very November. 24 top Nazi officials were charged and 12 were sentenced to death. A lot of the Nazis that weren't immediately rounded up faded away deep into Germany or all over the world to avoid the vengeful consequences. Lieutenant Colonel Adolf Eichmann, too, claimed that he was just a private in the Air Force and was locked up in a prisoner of war camp for the Allies. When his former comrades started dropping his name during the Nuremberg trials, the whole world now knew that a guy named Adolf Eichmann arguably had the most blood on his hands in all of human history. Eichmann did not like how things were looking for him. He broke out of his prisoner camp and lived a simple life pretending to be a simple lumberjack in rural Germany. In 1950, he managed to get the secret society of surviving Nazis to smuggle him from Germany to Italy all the way to Argentina. In 1952, he received his new personal identity documents, wore glasses, and grew out his beard to become unrecognizable enough to bring his family to Argentina with him all the way from Austria. Adolf Eichmann, or rather Ricardo Clement, got his first job in Argentina at a company owned by the secret Nazi society, then used the references and track record gained here to move from job to job, eventually settling down at a Mercedes factory in Buenos Aires. As far as he was concerned, he made the perfect getaway, and he was right. That is, until 1960 anyway. In 1949, Israel officially launched its own intelligence agency called the Mossad. Unfortunately for Eichmann, the Mossad did a bit more than the CIA or FBI's job of ensuring national security. If they can't protect their people, you can be damn well sure that the Mossad will avenge them. And they too were very good at their jobs. The prosecutor general for the West German state of Hessen was a Jewish man called Dr. Fritz Bauer. In 1957, he passed on a massive tip to the Mossad about the whereabouts of a particular public enemy. This top secret information came all the way from Argentina. Okay, so a bit of context. Adolf Eichmann changed his name to Ricardo Clement, but his family never changed their last name for some inexplicable reason. A Jewish girl in Argentina named Sylvia Hermann was dating a man named Klaus Eichmann. Klaus had no idea that Sylvia was Jewish because back then, a lot of Jewish people distanced themselves from their identity to, not get murdered. Assuming that Sylvia was a fellow German, Klaus immediately bragged about how his father was a high-ranking Nazi officer and spouted some really messed up anti-Semitic comments that would make even Kanye West wince. We're not going to repeat them on this channel because we'd rather stay in the YouTube Partner program, but yeah, it was pretty bad. Unfortunately for the Eichmanns, Sylvia's father, Lothar Hermann, was a Jew that barely survived the Holocaust while most of his family was murdered. Lothar, quite understandably, personally wanted to make sure that Adolf Eichmann paid for his crimes. He pieced together all the clues and tipped off Dr. Fritz Bauer. Fritz Bauer then directly informed Israel, and the hunt was on. Hold on, real quick. Why Israel? I mean, he's a prosecutor general for West Germany, remember? Well, there were still Nazis and Nazi sympathizers lurking in the ranks of the West German government. If the wrong person got word of this, Eichmann might disappear again. Mossad recruited the Hermann family as local informants and tried to find proof. In 1958, they sent an agent to knock on Eichmann's door and personally verify the truth of the tip. Alas, the man who answered the door was named Ricardo Clement and didn't look anything like the photographs. And so the case was closed and Mossad moved on. Dr. Bauer wasn't going to give up that easily. Something was really off about this whole thing. He harassed Mossad for a year and a half about Eichmann and kept personally investigating the issue. That's when he received another tip, the crucial key to the puzzle. Eichmann's new identity was Ricardo Clement. In February of 1960, Mossad frantically went back to Eichmann's house, but they were too late. Eichmann got spooked and disappeared yet again. Back to square one. Mossad diligently investigated his whereabouts and finally tracked down an address in San Bernardino. They learned that Eichmann's wife, Vera Eichmann, was living there, sure, but couldn't confirm the whereabouts of the man himself. Mossad thoroughly staked out the wife's house for several days on end, but there was no sign of Eichmann whatsoever. March 21st of 1960 was the 25th anniversary for the Eichmanns, and Mossad was really hoping that the man would show up for it. And he did. So-called Ricardo Clement, the man who got spooked into hiding and disappeared for 2 years, couldn't help but come home to his wife on this special day. Field agents immediately reported this news to Israel's Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion ordered the arrest and extradition of the most wanted man on Earth. 12 elite Mossad agents volunteered for the job, with some of them being actual Holocaust survivors in their childhood. The stakes were terrifyingly high. Not only could illegally kidnapping another country's citizen on its own soil lead to deadly clashes with swarms of local law enforcement, but this kind of provocation could lead to an all-out war. Esser Harel, the director of Mossad, flew out to Argentina so he could personally orchestrate this daredevil mission. Perfect timing, really. In about 3 months, so on May 20th of 1960, Argentina was about to celebrate its 150th Independence Day with a giant event. Representatives from Israel were invited as well, and were scheduled to arrive on May 11th, which was when Mossad would finally strike. The top executives of Israel's airline El Al were secretly in on the plan to avenge their loved ones too, and generously offered to fly the Israeli representatives out to Argentina on a private jet. The representatives were delighted, but they had no idea that the flight crew were actually Mossad agents in disguise, and that the plane had a secret room dedicated for one man, Adolf Eichmann. Mossad agents arrived in Argentina way in advance to follow Ricardo Clement's every movement and document his daily routines. A quote-unquote safe house was prepared to hold Eichmann until the flight back to Israel, and on May 9th, all the preparations were complete. It was now time for justice. Unfortunately, the plan immediately went sideways. Argentina suddenly requested that the Israeli representatives push back their flight to the 19th, which meant that the flight attendants/evac crew were arriving 10 days later than expected. Director Isser Harrell decided to commence the operation with only a 24-hour delay regardless. He would rather take the risk of deviating from the plan than giving Eichmann more time to disappear again. On the evening of May 11th, they were finally going to have their revenge on the man who ordered the slaughter of so many of their people. At exactly 8:05 p.m., Mossad agents in 2 black vans spotted Ricardo Clement on his way home from work. It was something they rehearsed 1,000 times. They dashed out, tackled Clement to the ground, and bundled him into a van within 30 seconds. What's your name? Otto Hanger. What's your name? Fine, Ricardo Clement. What's your name? Adolf Eichmann. Eichmann and the Mossad agents had to uncomfortably live together for the next 10 days straight after arriving at the safe house. It has only been 15 years since the end of World War II. Every single agent was deeply affected by it in one way or another. Furthermore, the terrifying possibility that the full might of the Argentinian law enforcement could be kicking in the door was enough to make the agents extremely jumpy. After quite some interrogation, they gave Eichmann a straightforward choice. You can either die here, or you can stand trial in Israel. Eichmann chose the latter, and signed whatever papers necessary. Finally, on May 19th, the Mossad evac squad arrived to Argentina, seamlessly mixed in with the official Israeli representatives. To delay Argentina's outrage about this blatant disregard for its sovereignty, the agents meticulously scrubbed the safe house and torched every trace of their existence. Then they all dressed up as the El Al flight crew with uniforms and new passports. Yes, I mean everyone. Eichmann was also dressed up as a flight attendant, although he was heavily sedated because his cover story was that he was a flight attendant that got in a car accident. To support this alibi, the agent that most closely resembled Eichmann actually hospitalized himself under Eichmann's flight attendant name. 11:45 on the 20th of May. The Mossad agents breezed through all airport security and took off for Israel. About a year later, on April 11th of 1961, the globally live-streamed 4-month-long trial of the notorious genocide architect Adolf Eichmann finally started. Eichmann was charged with 15 crimes under Israeli law, including crimes against the Jewish people, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and membership in a hostile organization. 110 survivors testified as the prosecution's witness, and 1,500 documents were submitted into evidence. The whole world watched as the horrifyingly egregious acts of the Nazis and Eichmann were laid out. Eichmann's lawyers claimed that he didn't have the authority to decide what actually happened, and gave the classic defense: just following orders. Well, that would have exonerated everyone except for Hitler, but the precedent set for his previously captured comrades during the Nuremberg trials didn't look hopeful. Eichmann didn't even try to deny his actions. After all, it was clear from testimony and evidence that Eichmann took an active initiative to lead the genocide. It was difficult to claim that he had no choice in the matter when he allegedly said the following to his assistant. On December 11th of 1961, Eichmann was found guilty of all 15 charges and was sentenced to death 4 days later. On May 31st of 1962, the architect of the Holocaust was hung to death on the gallows. Those were the last words of Adolf Eichmann. We'll never know what he was thinking as the noose tightened around his neck. Did he smile in the face of death? Or did he repent for his sins at the last minute? This has been David Bradford from Knowledge Raiders, and thank you for watching.